All right, today we're going to tackle a core problem that honestly creates so much confusion whenever we talk about faith. And it really boils down to this one critical difference: the distinction between the system you follow and the method you use to verify it. So let's dive in.
You know, it feels like the more we discuss faith, the more tangled and complicated the whole conversation gets. But what if the problem isn't that we don't have enough information? The source material we're looking at today suggests the real issue is a fundamental mix-up of core ideas, that we're just misunderstanding the very words we're using.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at this crisis of understanding. Then we'll define two absolutely critical terms, Din and Millah. After that, we'll see how these ideas play out with the example of Abraham and a really fascinating case study. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this distinction matters so much.
All right, first up, to make any sense of the conflicts and debates we see today, the source material argues that we've got to go back to basics. It's not about digging up some new secret information, but about getting crystal clear on the meaning of the words we're already using.
See, the argument here is that we've kind of just thrown everything into one big pot. Our beliefs, our laws, our ways of finding truth. And that creates this tangled mess, this intellectual knot, that makes it almost impossible to think clearly about these really important topics. So let's start untangling this thing. First, we have to isolate the what. You know, the actual system of rules and commands that a person or a society follows.
Okay, so in the original Arabic, the term is al-din. And what's really interesting is that it's a surprisingly neutral word. It just means the system you submit to. For example, the Quran itself talks about the deen of the king, and it's talking about the law of the land in ancient Egypt. So think of deen as the what. It's the rulebook. It has nothing to say about how you decided that rulebook was the right one.
And that leads us right into our second and honestly maybe the most important concept here. So if din is the what, what's the how? Well, that's Millah. It's not the belief itself, it's the process you use to get to that belief.
So al-Millah, that's your methodology, it's your investigative process. And what's so fascinating, and the source really points this out, is that the term is almost always tied to a person or a group, like the Millah of Abraham. This is a huge clue that it's not just any random method, it's a specific approach that someone championed.
Okay, let's just lay this out side by side so it's super clear. Din is the system, Millah is the method. Din is the what you follow, Millah is how you verify it's true. Din is just a set of rules. Millah is your whole framework for inquiry. This difference right here, it is the absolute key to understanding everything else we're about to talk about. So if we want to understand what the source presents as the ideal methodology, there's one person we absolutely have to look at, Abraham. He's not just shown as a prophet who delivered a message, he's presented as the champion, the prime example of a very specific, evidence-based method. And look, this isn't just some small detail. The source we're examining points out something incredible. Out of the 12 times the word Millah even shows up in the Quran, a whopping 10 of them are directly linked to Abraham. I mean, wow, the text is basically screaming at you, pay attention to this guy's method.
So what was his method? Well, it was all about being active, not passive. He wasn't someone who just accepted what he was told. He put everything to the test. He challenged his own dad's beliefs. He questioned the people worshipping stars. He went and debated the idol makers. He even stood up to a king, the most powerful man around, and confronted him with pure logic. His whole life was one big process of demanding proof.
And there's actually a special word for this methodology, Hanif. Now, according to the source, this doesn't just mean you're inclined to truth in some vague way. No, it means you are inclined toward truth that has solid evidence and real proof behind it. It's a commitment to the process, not just the outcome.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this play out in a real story? Well, the story of the people of the cave is just a perfect case study. It's not just the story about running away and hiding. The source frames it as this epic clash between two totally different methodologies.
So on one side, you've got these young people. What's their methodology? Inquiry. They're asking questions. They're demanding proof. They're basically on the Millah of Abraham. And on the other side, you've got their community. And their methodology? It's all inheritance. It's we believe this because our fathers did. They're just blindly defending tradition. That's what the source calls an ancestral Millah.
And their own words really get to the heart of it. You hear that? Their whole argument boils down to one question. Where is the proof? They're asking for a clear authority. By doing this, they are putting themselves squarely in that tradition of Abraham's evidence-based Millah.
Okay, so we've got these two paths, right? Inquiry versus inheritance. Why is this such a big deal? Why does it matter so much? Well, because according to the source material we're looking at, choosing the wrong path, the wrong methodology, has some really profound spiritual costs.
And this is probably the most powerful and maybe even shocking argument the source makes. It says that to believe something only because your parents or your ancestors or your teachers told you to, without ever demanding and checking the proof for yourself, is actually considered a form of shirk, which means associating partners with God.
So wait a minute, why is it such a serious charge? Let's break down the logic here. It's because you're putting your loyalty to people, your family, your scholars, above your loyalty to the evidence. You believe because they believed. It means if a new truth came along that contradicted tradition, you'd reject it. See, it makes people, not proof, the final authority in your faith.
And to contrast this, the source points to verses that praise a totally different kind of person, the ones who listen to the word and follow the best of it. The idea is that true guidance comes from engaging with the message itself, not just blindly following the messenger.
And this all brings us right back to the central point of this whole explainer. This whole distinction between din, the what, and millah, the how. It teaches us something incredibly important. How you come to believe something is just as crucial, maybe even more crucial than what you end up believing. The process itself is what gives the conclusion its strength.
So I'll leave you with a question that turns this whole analysis back on us, on you. And it's a tough question, no matter who you are or what you believe. Is your conviction built on a foundation of personal inquiry and evidence, or on the comfortable but maybe fragile ground of tradition? Because, as we've seen, that choice of methodology, well, it changes everything.